I go to court for the sentencing, and the judge gives me the minimum 5 years and apologizes for having to send me to prison for a single day.
And
on the record.
There was actually a YouTube video of that sentencing where you're sitting there, you're giving your impact statement.
Whenever my mother and father asked me if Dennis Pegg had hurt me, I denied it. Throughout my life, I periodically saw Dennis Pegg around town. Frequently, he was with young boys.
This is gonna hurt.
It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Memories and recollections are a dual-edged sword. The fondness of a grandparent, the encouraging words of a mother, or a great achievement all warm your heart and fill your soul. Remembrance can also bring about regret. For a short time, many are able to repress damaging or harsh memories from their past. Only the good shines through, and we begin to see through rose-colored glasses. But eventually, the horrors of regrettable remembrance will poke through in unhealthy manners. Total recall can be the path to healing, changing the narrative of forgettable moments and repurposing them to become a strength. Rather than forgetting, we embrace our past, both good and bad. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and welcome to Season 4 of the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. Follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome back one of our most special guests in the world, and that's Clark Fredericks, to talk about the suffering of forgiveness. If you remember, Clark was in on episode 89 to talk about the suffering of revenge, so it's a natural progression that we talk about the suffering of forgiveness.
And Clark, do me a favor. Don't piss me off this time, because I'm not in the mood for your shit today.
Here we go. Starting already. You know, they'll be able to see that probably.
You were in that lawsuit, weren't you?
I was.
He's one of those latch-on guys. You know, he hears money out there. Let me go get him.
Even the Boy Scout lawsuit isn't off bounds for him?
Nah.
Holy hell. People said to me last time, why didn't you smack that guy around? And I came in here determined to smack Mike around.
No, I went like this, and Clark said, with you.
All I know is when Clark started going, my foot hit the ground because I'm like, this guy's going to destroy the fucking studio.
I was checking the window over here.
This is going to be a wild episode, but before we get into it, let's get into our marquee sponsor, and that's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police, but we do trust them, so go to toyotahackensack.com. Let them find you a car. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Clark, we take a question from our audience. This week's social media question comes from Steve the Pet Peeve. What do you see as your power?
Well, my power.
Curls? Bench press?
It's everything I've overcome. I've survived. I survived eating poisonous mushrooms at age 4.
Wow.
Yeah. I survived open heart surgery at age 6. Life or death. Had a $50 size hole in my heart that I was born with. I survived childhood molestation. I survived rape at age 12. I survived my next door neighbor, who was like a brother to me, committing suicide when I was 17. I survived my 80-year-old grandmother getting raped and murdered down in Naples, Florida.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I survived drugs and alcohol more than, any rock star could dream of doing. I survived having a hit put on me by the mob for gambling debt. I survived my father's death. I survived finding my brother dead on our kitchen floor just a few months ago. I survived murdering the animal who raped me. I survived putting a knife through my hand. I survived going to prison for 5 years. I survived countless other really, really close friends' suicides over the years. And I've survived failure upon failure upon failure. And my superpower, or my power that you ask about, would be how I've transformed from all those things creating a victim to no longer being a victim, to using all of that, for strength. You can use all the pain and trauma in your life for destruction, or if you can harness that pain and trauma, you can really use it for construction and become a force for change in the world. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Use it for construction instead of destruction.
Yeah. Did I say it wrong?
You're basically...
No, you said you use it for construction, yeah. Use it for construction instead of destruction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I know what you're saying.
You basically stated the mission statement of this show, because that's how Mike and I have gotten here to this show. We've used our pain and our trauma to construct where it used to deconstruct us really bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
me too.
We ought to think about changing. That was rough. I mean, we got to think about changing the name of the show. Mike, what do you think? What's your power?
And it's really what Clark said. I mean, I believe my power is me. My power is my will to keep moving forward. I mean, we've all been through some shit. And if you don't have that love for yourself or that will to keep moving forward, I mean, to me, that would be my power.
I think my power is my ability to connect with people. And it's not connecting people to people through your strength. It's connecting through your weaknesses. Right. If you're able to show your vulnerability, it really brings, that's when people start to listen. So if I were to sit here and tell you that, hey, listen, I was in the gym today and I put up 315 for 15 reps and all that stuff, which I didn't. I'm 49 years old. Those days are long gone. But if I were to tell you that, you'd be like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's nice. And then you get into the masculinity thing where it's like, oh, yeah, well, I put up 315 for 16. And then you start going one up on everybody. But the minute you open yourself up, Clark, and you say, oh, I survived childhood rape at the age of 12, all of a sudden people go, really? Oh, my God. And now people start to listen to your words. And your words have much more power after you open up your vulnerabilities.
Agreed.
So if you're born to like millionaires and you try to do this show, where everything was given to you your whole life, who's really going to take you serious?
Right. You have to have been there, but you also have to own it as well. And that's how I see your power, Clark, is you own it. But that ability that I have to lay my heart on the table, because nobody's ever going to judge me as much as I judge myself. So once I was able to do that, that's when I really started to connect to people. And thankfully, I have this group of friends now that are really close that I can call on when I need them, and they can call on me when they need me. I'm that person that says, when you need me, call me, and that's not just me saying it. I will do it. I will move stuff around at the detriment of my own family sometimes.
I mean, like you said, though, I mean, you connect with people at your weakest level, and that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, on Instagram, when I have a post I like, I'll boost it sometimes, to try to gain followers. And I don't know, it was over a year ago. I boosted a post, and some dude from Texas, reached out, and he's like, I could never find inspiration in you. You murdered somebody, and I'm like, hey, that's your prerogative. But exactly. In order to have a message, you have to come through a mess. And I go, that's why people find me inspirational, is because I came through the biggest mess anybody could ever do.
What's the first 4 words of message? Mess.
Yeah, man. Right? Yeah. So the dude totally, and look, not everybody's going to be a cheerleader of Clark, Yeah.
I love the internet trolls. I actually laugh at them sometimes.
Feed off of them.
And because they just want attention. They're just trying to grab your stuff. And every once in a while, I'll give it to them. I'll say, they're like, oh, you're a crybaby or whatever. And I'll say, well, you obviously didn't listen to the episode, because if you would have heard, it's not about that. And that just feeds them on. And then I'll start doing really passive aggressive thing, like put in there like last word. And then they'll come back and tell them last word, just so I get the last word. That's all I want to do. So Steve, the pet peeve, thank you so much for sending that in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air. So the airing date was September 22nd, 2022. We get this guy that was just this weird meeting in here, and he tells us a story that blows our doors off.
Yeah, we talk all the time about, like, when we come in here, like, our ride home is our decompression time.
Yeah.
Me and Kevin will usually call each other and say, like, what'd you think? I think it was a silent ride home.
I didn't sleep that night.
You had told me that.
We just went home and, I just stared at the road the whole way home going.
I mean, both you guys reached out to me, afterwards, and then the day after, and then the week after, and you still reach out to me now, and that's why I came back here.
You're a friend.
Well, that's it, and I rewatched, the clip of where I'm going into the murder.
The most popular clip on TikTok that we have, by far. I still get comments about it a year later.
I started doing EMDR therapy, and EMDR therapy is to process your trauma
and rewire your brain. I do it as well.
And my trauma has just been floating around in me, and I relive it all the time. Like when I do a motivational speech or when I do a podcast, I go back to that. And when I saw myself on your podcast talking about the murder, I am back in the house. I am there as I'm here. And you were like, oh, holy shit, bro. I might have to stand up and control this guy.
What Dennis said next was going to predict what I was going to do, or however you put it that day.
Yeah.
It was the first time, and your episode was 89. It was the first time in 89 episodes where I actually became not concerned for my own safety.
No,
he was concerned for my safety.
That I was actually concerned that you were going to let that regression take over you. And
the veins were popping out in his neck and everything. And you could tell that you were reliving that moment.
Yeah, man.
Right here.
Because of your episode is why I do my social media the way it's done for our show. Because that pulling those clips out of there were so many of them. And I used to do one clip for our show, for our whole show. Because of your episode, now it's a clip for each section.
Right.
Because there were so many of them, I'm like, this is what it's supposed to be. So your episode not only evolved us as human beings, but it evolved the way we put our show out there. And it was one. I don't want to draw away from this show because I want people to watch this show, but watch 89 first. It's a nice little precursor.
Right.
Why don't you give our audience a little bit of a short recap, the quick 5-minute version? I know you're.
I was molested by my Boy Scout leader, and he was a lieutenant in the sheriff's department. Most predators have a position of authority, and that's what sustains them to do what they do. It's not the troll under the bridge, that grabs a kid. It's somebody and trust and love.
Hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, man. And
is well respected in the community.
Oh, absolutely. Even after other victims came forward, there's still people that are just like, oh, Dennis would never do that. No, Dennis was just such a great guy. Whatever. That's what they do. They went over the victim. They went over the victim's family. They went over the community. They need that whole support network. And so people will be like, never, could never be him.
And that's how he got away with it so many times for so long.
Yeah, 40 years plus, man.
Was there ever any women victims of him?
No.
So it was strictly guys.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I was wondering that because he's a pedophile, but he's a pedophile for boys. It doesn't make it better. I was curious.
Yeah, there's some that go any child, and then there's others that stick strictly to girls or strictly to boys.
And then you get put in the prison that he was working at, which is bizarre.
Yeah, when I talk to people, who think their life is over and they're down and out, and how can I ever come? I'm like, look, I was arrested for murdering a lieutenant, and I was put into the jail where he roamed the halls for 27 years. Yeah. And it can't get worse than that. Come on. But I stayed in the belly of the beast to get tried there, even though I accepted a plea deal. But my lawyer wanted me to stay there because people talk. So the prosecutor is going to hear stuff from cops or whoever who knew rumors about him. And that's what happened. Rumors started circulating and, victims started coming forward. And, I was originally, for 3 years, I faced life in prison, and I I took a plea deal to second-degree manslaughter and got 5 years. The judge gave me the minimum. To his credit, he did that.
It's a hard thing because I understand why you took the plea deal, because you did it. I mean, there's no bones about it. You did the crime, but there were some extenuating circumstances behind the crime that nobody can possibly imagine.
Right.
Could it be passion provocation? I don't think that would tie into this.
Well, that's what we ended up going with, and that we originally started with diminished capacity, and after I did my psych eval, you have to do a psych eval with someone for the defense, and then the prosecutor has to have a psych eval by their psych. And it was actually his psych that came up with passion provocation. He goes, Clark fits into all the 4 categories of passion provocation.
And that prosecutor probably went, oh, shit.
No, we had already, had a deal for the plea deal. This was after we went to court for me accepting the plea deal.
I think one of the things we didn't get into in your original episode was when you took that plea deal and you were going in for another 2 years, right? So you already done, was it time served?
When I accepted the plea deal and went to court, I was right at the 3-year mark. And it took another 6 months for sentencing. And then I had to go to Northern State Prison in Newark for a year.
So you did a year after
the plea deal.
So
yeah.
You take a plea deal and you realize, because I remember very clearly, you're sitting in that state police barracks, thinking your life is totally over,
done.
You're just resigned to the fact that you were going to spend the rest of your life in prison. You get that plea deal and you realize you get a new lease on life. Yeah, you got to go through. I know a year in prison, 5 years in prison is no joke. But what did that feel like when you realized your life wasn't over?
It took till my sentencing, but actually, it took to signing the plea deal, accepting the plea deal. Then I knew I was facing 5 to 10. I already had 3 in. So, my lawyer's trying to tell me, no judge wants to be at the low end, so expect, especially in a murder case, expect something towards the top of the 10.
Middle to top.
Yeah. And so he's getting me all pumped up for that. And then, I go to court for the sentencing, and the judge gives me the minimum 5 years and apologizes for having to send me to prison for a single day.
And
on the record.
There was actually a YouTube video of that sentencing where you're sitting there, you're giving your impact statement.
Whenever my mother and father asked me if Dennis Pegg had hurt me, I denied it. Throughout my life, I periodically saw Dennis Pegg around town. Frequently, he was with young boys. In the spring of 2011, I saw Dennis Pegg with a boy who was about 13 or 14 years old at the Quick Check in Newton. I immediately suspected that he was molesting the boy.
And you're laying it all out. By the way, you look like a totally different person.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the YouTube videos, like I'm trying to shrink down as low as I can.
Under your attorney's advice?
Just trying to hide myself, I've done a bunch of podcasts and people are like, I don't know how he can speak so easily about, everything that's happened. Well, go look at the YouTube video of me in court. It took a while to, be able to talk about it freely and openly.
Well, that's a good point. Mike, when the first time you talked about your shooting, your incident, what do you remember? I remember because I was there. I was there when he did it in group. You were a completely different person the way you're telling me.
Like I said, slouched down at the shoulders. You feel like lesser of a person. You feel those. It's like the demons are on your shoulders and they're just bringing you down.
Right.
It takes a long time to accept what you do, stick your chest out and say, yeah, this is me. This is what happened.
Right.
But when you first talk about it, it's a whole different generation.
When he first came into group, do you remember the first thing I said to you? What I did?
Yeah, you told me you were a landscaper.
There's a reason why. I was embarrassed to tell anybody I was a police officer. I was 30 at the time. I was 40 years old. I'm retired at the time he comes in. And I didn't want to tell anybody I was a police officer because there's that inevitable question afterwards. Wow, you retired really young. What'd you do, get on when you're 12? You know, and I didn't want to answer that question because I didn't want
to go there yet.
I didn't want to talk. I wasn't ready. So that's why, that's a very important point because that's why I told you I was a landscaper. It was a joke. Obviously I'm there. Everybody knew I was a cop, but it was sort of a joke. But I told a lot of people that, yeah, I'm a landscaper because I just didn't want that. I wasn't ready. But once I was ready, it was a completely different ballgame for me.
Right.
Now,
let me just interrupt before we go on to your next thing.
It's okay. It's only our show. Don't worry about it.
Welcome to the Clark Fredericks Show.
Clark Fredericks Show. My guests today are Kevin and Mike.
So you want to sit over here?
Come on.
So when I'm going to court, the only time I've ever talked about it was to my lawyer and to the psychiatrist. That's it. 2 people. My family didn't know anything. The world didn't know anything. So, I go walking into court and there's all my family lined up in the front row. And I'm going to also be talking about my older brother and what happened to him. And I'm going to be talking about my next door neighbor, Jeff, who committed suicide when I was 17 and what happened to him. And, so everybody's right there. This is going to be the first time they're going to hear my story. They know nothing, so that, that's like, that weight is like, and I got to bring my brother into it and Jeff into it and everybody's right there. And then every news organization was there. So it's going out to the world and it's just like, and I was a victim still, the thing I just said, I'm not going to be a victim any longer. Back then I was still a victim.
When you're in jail, when did it start to transform for you?
My second year. My first year, you'll love this. My first year was a complete debacle for me. I was so horribly depressed. And
so if somebody came up and stabbed you, that would have been a good day.
Yeah. I'm having suicidal fantasies. I don't want to spend life in prison. Why?
Well, plus you were an addict at that point, too, right? So now you're going through all that.
Yeah, withdrawn from drugs. And I needed a new crutch. I always had, sex as a crutch, gambling as a crutch, drugs, alcohol. And in jail, my crutch became food. And, I just stayed in my cell that first year and just ate the whole shebang chip. Don't ever try a whole shebang chip. It's like cocaine, man. They're so good. You just and I put on at the end of each year you're locked up. They do a little mini physical on you, and I put on 62 pounds in 1 year.
What else are you gonna do?
And they sent me to a cardiologist because I was so swollen. I had edema so bad, and so the cardiologist cleared me, and then my lawyer came in one day, and we're allowed to swear, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
And he's like, we went into the little cubicle room, and he's like,